First. Okay, so we are now recording. So thank you so much for everyone for joining us today. We are honored here to have financial advisor, community advocate, and founder of A Night to Remember Pittsburgh, Bryan Gratton, speaking with us today. He will be speaking on the topic of financial planning while keeping in line loved ones with intellectual and/or developmental disabilities. So thank you so much, Bryan, for joining us, and the floor is yours.
All right. Well, I'm definitely honored to be here. I'm going to share my screen with you all. Um, yeah, and just share with you a little bit about life. I appreciate you reaching out, Sharice. It's so funny. You guys can see Jamie on here too. To me, she's Miss Gallo. She was my daughter's or my son's I can't remember what grade teacher she was. Moved to Missouri, and she messaged me the other day. She's like, "I'm still on Down Syndrome Association of Pittsburgh's email list, and I see you're speaking. I'm excited about that." So, yeah, thanks for jumping in, Jamie. Good to
Yeah,
see
I
you.
had two, Caden and Mia, third
That's right.
grade.
That's crazy. Yeah, that was a
Yep.
while ago. And now Caden is a freshman at Penn State, so I'll get to that in a little bit. But yeah, so before I kind of jump into all the financial planning stuff, I kind of want to just give you a little bit of background on me so you guys get to know me a little bit. I'm a big relationship guy, so I just want you guys to get to know who I am as a person a little bit first. And this is my family. My wife, Kristen, she's also my business partner. We got four kids. They're all awesome. Kai is 20. He's this, I don't know if you can see my cursor or not, but Kai's 20. Caden is 19. Kai is a sophomore at Robert Morris. Caden is a just finished his freshman year at Penn State. Mia is 17, about to be a senior at Mars High School. And Miley is 15. She's about to be a sophomore at Mars High School. I grew up in Irwin. My wife grew up in Elwood City. We met at Geneva College. So we're like basically Yinzers, born and bred. Spent a couple of years in Florida in between, but mostly Yinzers. In 2003, I started a church in Cranberry called Discovery Christian Church. I was a pastor there for 12 years before switching careers. My wife took over her dad's financial planning practice about 13 years ago. And she's a rock star. She's this one right here, obviously. She's a rock star. When she took over, business exploded. It grew and grew and grew. And she was looking to hire somebody. And she's like, Brian, I want to hire somebody like you that likes people and likes to go out and talk to people. And so started working with her. Yeah, that was 10 years ago now. She hired me. And before that, 13 years ago, while I was still a pastor at Discovery, I started an organization called A Night to Remember. And maybe some of you have heard of it. It's a red carpet gala for people with special needs. You might have heard Tim Tebow does one too. It's called A Night to Shine. Mine started 13 years ago. His started 11 years ago. I'm not saying he stole my idea, but just a couple years after us, he started. And I love to see how it's gone nationwide, and it's just a great event. But we still do A Night to Remember. We just did it what a couple weeks ago here in May. Um, and we had 460 special needs guests walk the red carpet. It's a event for people ages 16 and up. And it's grown exponentially over the last, 13 years. And yeah, we just did it. So people ask me a lot of times, do you have a child with special needs? How did you get into this? And I will say, I don't have a child with special needs. Um, for me, this started when I was a pastor back then. I was, looking at how can we serve the community? How can our church serve the community? And there's this story, and I'm not going to get all preachy and weird on you or anything like that, but just quick story. In Luke chapter 14, Jesus tells a story in the Bible. He says, when you throw a party, don't do it for the rich and the popular and the politicians and the people who come to all the parties. Throw a party and make it extravagant, you know, but do it for people who don't often get invited to a party. And so I just said, what if we did that like in real life? And so that's kind of how A Night to Remember started. Is we just decided to throw this extravagant party for people that don't always get invited to the party. Um, when I was in eighth grade, and kind of this is where my relationship with the special needs community started when I was in eighth grade. I was on student government at school. I had a lot of things going for me. I was on different sports teams. I was getting good grades. And our student government took a trip down to the Good Ship Lollipop. You guys remember, like the Gateway Clipper feet Good Ship Lollipop? And we were on there. This was eighth grade. There was like a DJ, there was dancing. It was different student governments from all over Pittsburgh, all middle school student governments. So you can imagine like how awkward that is in general, that it's a bunch of middle schoolers with DJs and trying to all be cool. So we were there, and I didn't know much about the special needs community at the time, but looking back, there was probably a group of people from maybe a day camp or something, some a group of special needs people out for a day trip. And one kid in particular, I'll never forget, he was sitting against the wall, and I was with my group of friends, and we were dancing and having a good time. And I saw him, and I didn't even know what this was at the time, but looking back, he was stimming. He was kind of like rocking back and forth against the wall. He probably had autism of some sort. And I thought to myself, man, I should go over and like see if he wants to hang out with us. Like, who do I think I am that I'm cooler than somebody else or, shouldn't be talking to somebody else? But I chose not to go speak to them. I remember this. I went home that night and I thought to myself, like, who do I think I am? That I'm better than somebody else or don't want to talk to somebody else because they're not cool or whatever it is. And so from that point on, I tried to want to be an includer. That like my goal was always just to be an includer. And so I think that's kind of where it started for me with the special needs community. And then yeah, when the opportunity presented itself to start Night to Remember, we just went with it and been doing it ever since. When I switched careers 10 years ago, the very first designation I got was my chartered special needs consultant, qualifying me to kind of work specifically with families that have loved ones with special needs. So professionally, I am a holistic financial advisor. We do a lot of, financial planning. We do investments, we do insurances, we do life and disability insurance, we do retirement income planning. We specialize in helping people retire early. But also, I got this designation to work specifically to do financial plannings for families that have loved ones with special needs. So over the next kind of, 30, 45 minutes, however long this takes, we're going to talk about planning holistically for a loved one with special needs. Now, I need to give you a couple of disclosures. Number one, I am not a CPA, so this is not tax advice. I am not an attorney. This is not legal advice. Please consult your attorney or tax person for specific tax or legal advice. I'm just giving you some basic knowledge. All right. I mentioned this earlier. I have my chartered special needs consultant designation. I know of at least two other people in the Pittsburgh area that have this designation. It's awarded to financial professionals who've completed 128 hours of academic classes, in addition to having at least 5 years of financial advising experience. And again, specifically for working with families that have loved ones with special needs. So that's kind of all like the preview stuff, but let's get into the nuts and bolts. Over the last, let's say, 10 years in working with families that have loved ones with special needs, the biggest question I get or the biggest concern I get is what will happen to my loved one if I'm no longer able to care for them? Whether it's if I pass away, if I have a long-term care issue myself, who's going to take care of my loved one, with their best interest in mind? How are we going to be able to afford future costs of caring for them? Will they be happy? Will they be healthy? Will they be secure? Who will step in and fill in my shoes when I'm not there to take care of them? And you're probably familiar with some of these, but I'm just going to give you a high level description of the kinds of government benefits that are available out there and why we need to do financial planning. There's two different kinds of benefits. There's the pension insurance type of benefits. These are based on contributions into a program and not really based on a financial need. So, example, there's something like Social Security disability insurance, Medicare. You can qualify for these things based on your contributions as a person, or also a parent's contribution. If you are someone that has special needs or disability, you can qualify based on your parents' contributions to the program. We all contribute them as a part of our paycheck. I don't know if you noticed this or not, but when you get a paycheck, you don't get all the money that you're actually entitled to. If you get $25 an hour, you don't make $25 an hour. Some of that gets held back in the form of taxes, and some of those taxes go to pay for some of these benefits. You and I are all contributing to it. The second type of benefit is what's called a needs-based type of benefit. And here's when the government uses financial considerations, basically countable assets, countable income. If you have too much income, too much assets, then you don't qualify for these. And those ones are SSI, or Supplemental Security Income, and Medicaid. And you've probably heard about this at some point, maybe if you've been in this for a little bit, you maybe know about. Somebody has told you you cannot have $2,000 in your loved one with special needs name, because if you do, they will not qualify for their benefits. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today and kind of unpack what that means. Again, here we go. $2,000 in assets is kind of the magic number, right? And so how do you avoid this problem? Our loved ones with special needs, they need Medicaid. SSI can be extremely helpful, but it's really difficult to live on $967 a month. That's the SSI payment for someone who's low income or no income, has special needs. $967 a month. So how can we keep the resources of just the 967 coming in, but also the ability to qualify for Medicaid and the different Medicaid waiver programs that maybe some of you are familiar with? We want to make sure they continue to qualify for these. And we have to be really careful because there's only certain allowable resources to have. They're allowed to have a home, burial reserves, burial space and marker, and a motor vehicle, and $2,000. And that's it. And I'll tell you where I see a lot of problems happen is when parents that have a loved one with special needs pass away, they've tried to do two things. Number one, I see that they just disinherit their loved one with special needs. They say, I can't leave them any money because if I do, then they're going to be off of these government benefits. Or the other thing I see happen sometimes is well-intentioned relatives, and I see this probably more often than disinheritance. I see well-intentioned relatives, maybe an aunt, an uncle, a cousin that says, "Boy, I really love my niece Judy who has special needs, and I wanted to leave her something in my will," and they leave her a part of their estate. And now all of a sudden, Judy no longer qualifies for her benefits because her aunt, who loves her so much, left her $30,000. And so now she gets kicked off her government benefits. She gets kicked out of her Medicaid waiver program that she had. And you guys know, and if you have any experience in this, it is so hard to get on those waiver programs often. There's such a long waiting list for those. And then to have to go through that process again is a pain. So our goal would be to avoid that from happening. So how do we protect the money that we have? There's a lot of different legal and financial issues, and I'm going to go through some of those today. So in general, estate planning has both the financial and a legal aspect to it. And everybody should speak with an attorney. Make sure you have proper wills, trusts, powers of attorney, healthcare proxies, living wills. All this legal planning is very important for anybody, let alone somebody that has a loved one with special needs. It is even more so important. So if you haven't talked to an estate planning attorney, especially somebody that has experience in working with a person that has a loved one with special needs, please make sure you do that. We talk to all of our clients, well, whether they have a loved one with special needs or not, about all these estate planning tactics. So you need to make sure you do that. If you need a recommendation to attorneys that have experience in this, I know quite a few of them that I have relationships with in the area that are really good. Families with special needs dependents, in addition to the typical planning, you're going to have some unique estate planning steps that you're going to have to explore. You'll need similar planning, but also in addition, probably the use of maybe a special needs trust as part of this comprehensive, holistic plan that you might have to make sure that we protect financial and also their access to government benefits. So I'm going to talk about kind of like these legal things a little bit first. But again, once again, I am not an attorney. This is not legal advice, but I know a lot about this stuff. So I'm going to just kind of unpack it a little bit for you on a high level. Okay. What is a last will and testament? I'm not going to ask you to show your hands because I wouldn't see any of them anyway. But if you could show your hands, think to yourself, how many of you have a will already? And I will say, if you don't have a will, if you die without one, you kind of have one anyway, because the state gets to decide what the will says if you die without a will. And most importantly, I tell people, the state will get to decide who gets to care for your loved ones. Whether they have special needs or not, they get to decide at that point who takes care of them. So it is so important to have at least a will in place. And I know these are tough conversations, maybe with a spouse to say, well, who's it going to be? Who's going to be in charge? Have the fight, deal with the fight, figure it out. If you have to flip a coin in the end, that's still going to be better than leaving it up to some judge of the state to decide. So make sure you get that done. Okay. Power of attorney. This is another incredibly important estate planning document. Even if you don't have a loved one with special needs, but especially if you do. Power of attorney gives somebody else the power to make decisions for you. So when we're doing estate planning, if we want to protect assets in the event of a long-term care incident, maybe some of you have dealt with this with parents or grandparents that have gone into long-term care. This gives another person that has the ability to make these decisions the ability to make decisions about bank accounts and to sell real estate and to move assets if we need to protect them. So this is an incredibly important document, also a power of attorney. And then we can talk a little bit about trust. What is a trust? A trust avoids probate. Probate is the process of making your estate public and kind of finalizing the estate. This avoids that. If you have stuff in a trust, they're not matters of public record. It privatizes it. And a trustee, the role of the trustee in a trust is the person who's kind of responsible for the management of the assets in the trust. And then we start thinking about who's the best choice to be the trustee of a trust. Maybe it's grandma. Grandma might know the dependents the best, but can grandma manage money in a trust? In some circumstances, a good idea to have co-trustees, somebody who has maybe a relationship with the loved ones who are the beneficiaries of the trust, but also somebody who can handle the assets in the trust. So maybe a family member, maybe a professional money manager as kind of both assets of that, or both trustees of a trust. We'll get into that a little bit more details in the future. But so we know the problem, right? The problem is when it comes to planning for a loved one with special needs, is that our loved one gets $2,000 to their name. And if they have over that, they lose benefits. So we don't want Aunt Glenda leaving their 401k or a part of their life insurance or naming our loved one with special needs in a will. We don't want to disinherit them completely and say, well, you get nothing, we'll just leave it up to the state to take care of you. Some other people I've talked to, they've said, well, I'm just going to leave money to their sibling to take care of my loved one with special needs, and the sibling will just take care of them. And I've seen that go bad because, the sibling doesn't always want that responsibility. And even if sometimes the sibling says, oh, yes, absolutely, we will take care of it, um, I've seen it go bad sometimes. There needs to be some structure to that, and that's where a trust can come into play. Maybe we hope that Aunt Linda steps in and takes care of them, or maybe we do a special needs trust or an ABLE account or both. And typically, what I find the best solution comes through through a lot of conversations to say, okay, what is our best solution here? How do we solve this problem? And so I will go through a couple of these solutions first. Let's just talk about special needs trust first, or supplemental needs trust. You've probably heard a bit about these at some point. So I'll get into them. A special needs trust, it protects government benefit eligibility for our beneficiaries. It enables your dependent to receive assets from your estate while still preserving their government benefits. They're designed to protect the quality of life for your dependent. The purpose of the trust is not to just take over the government benefits, but it's to supplement them. Or as the way the lawyers like to tell you, it is to supplement state and federal programs, not supplant state and federal programs. And really, when you set up a special needs trust or a supplemental needs trust, all family members and really loved ones, anybody who has a relationship with this loved one needs to know that a trust has been set up. Because again, I would say well-intentioned relatives is who I see this kind of mess up these plans the most. And you appreciate it so much if your relative wants to give money to your loved one with special needs. Um, but without the proper setup, you just don't want them to lose their government benefits. A supplemental needs trust can provide for a lot of things. There are some restrictions on it. Again, we can't take over government benefits, but can provide for specialized medical equipment, eyeglasses, even potentially a trip to Disney with a caregiver. There's a lot of things that this can go towards that are kind of helping to maintain the quality of life for your loved one with special needs. So kind of go over the way of looking at the value of a special needs trust. So on the left, you see kind of the basic sources of government benefits, right? Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare. It's through these typical programs that kind of the basic and personal needs of our loved one with special needs are met, along with kind of the essential care and supervision that they need. And even sometimes employment, other related services for the individual with special needs. On the right-hand side, if we look at the graphic, it's this is where the special needs trust can come in, or the supplemental needs trust. Two things happen. First, our benefits on the left graphic are still maintained because the money in the special needs trust does not again count against them towards that $2,000 limit. So they maintain all of the benefits on the left, and also they're able to use the supplemental needs trust to help with kind of other things: medical, dental care, gifts, professional fees, vacations, trips, basic care. If social benefits are cut back at some point. Unfortunately, Medicare is underfunded. Social Security is underfunded. We've already seen some cuts to Medicaid on the plate here, and so we're paying attention to all that. So if those needs are cut back, the supplemental needs trust can step in and help with some of that. Personal hygiene, grooming costs, kind of all of those things can be helped out by the special needs trust. Who can establish a special needs trust, or who maybe should establish a special needs trust? Overall, we've been discussing the trust, but who can do it? Who can set it up? Basically, the government says anybody that has a vested interest in the person with special needs can set up a supplemental needs trust or a special needs trust. A caregiver, a donor, a grandparent, a sibling, a spouse, kind of anybody that has a vested interest in the loved one's special needs, they can set up a trust. Anyone who asks the question, who will take care of them when I'm not around, or how can I pass a part of my estate without affecting their government assistance? Say most of the time, the way I see it play out is parents will set up a supplemental needs trust for their loved one with special needs is typically how it works. And how does a special needs trust work? The trust document, it's a legal contract that stipulates how the monies contributed to the trust are to be dispersed to the beneficiary or for the benefit of the beneficiary. And I'll tell you, do not, I really recommend highly not using an online place to do your supplemental needs trust, because state-specific language is very important. You want to make sure you use somebody, if you're living in Pennsylvania, you want to make sure you use somebody who's familiar with PA Medicaid law, because Medicaid is played out amongst the states. While it's a federal program, it's kind of exercised by the states. So you want to make sure you use a state-specific person. The trust document also names a trustee who's responsible to carry out the terms of the trust agreement. And again, this can be multiple trustees if you want it to, or it can be a single person. But the trustee is obligated to act both in accordance with the provisions of the trust and in the interest of the beneficiaries. So there's a lot of ways that these can be started. And there's a few different kinds of supplemental needs trusts. The first one I'll go over is called a first party, or this one's called a Medicaid payback trust. And as it's in the name, you can probably assume why, because in the event of the death of the person with special needs, Medicaid gets a clawback of this trust. They get to say, hey, whatever's left in there, I've been keeping track of my expenses. I'm talking like I'm Medicaid now, okay? Medicaid's been keeping track of my expenses, and Medicaid says, I want my expenses back if there's anything left in this trust. Typically, where we see a first party um, supplemental needs trust set up is because somebody was, let's just say it's an automobile accident and they received, and they're disabled now for the rest of their life, and they get a settlement. Recently, I saw this. Um, Amazon hit somebody, and Amazon paid a big payout, and so the court said, okay, we're going to set it up in a trust for the beneficiary, and in the event the beneficiary passes away, Medicaid gets a clawback of that trust. So that's one kind of trust. I will say that's not the most common kind of trust for most situation. This one, the third party special needs trust or supplemental needs trust, I would say is probably the more common one that I see. This trust can be, again, set up by anybody that has a vested interest in the person with special needs. The beneficiary donor can be any age. The donor sets up the trust by gifting into an irrevocable trust or an irrevocable trust. Or a lot of times what I'll see at is this happens at death or as a part of their estate. So just to give you an example, I like examples that help me put, wheels on things, right? Parents say, when I pass away, a portion of my estate is going to go into a supplemental needs trust. Maybe it hasn't been funded yet, but it'll be funded at my death to say, let's say I have three kids, a third of my estate is going to go to one child, a third of my estate is going to go to the other child, and a third of my estate is going to go into the supplemental needs trust for my child with special needs. Okay, that's typically how I see these third-party special needs trusts set up. And when they're drafted properly, there is no Medicaid payback on these ones. So Medicaid can't come back and say, hey, whatever's left in that trust, I want to get my hands on. You can have what's called a beneficiary. In the event that the person with special needs passes away, then your other children could be the beneficiary of whatever's left and they can split it. Or it can be somebody else, or it can be a nonprofit organization if you want them to be the beneficiary of it. And the trust provides for benefits that the government cannot provide, all the kind of extra benefits. So let's look at trustee because this is a really important role when it comes to the supplemental needs trust. Trustee can be one or more persons or even entities. As this chart shows, in this example, there are three different types of trustees. There's a trustee that's kind of like the corporate trustee that handles investments, record keeping. There's a tax return that needs filed with a supplemental needs trust. There can be a medical social worker that can act as trustee, and maybe they handle more of the treatments, the therapy, the medical procedures that are going on with the loved one with special needs. There can be a family member who handles distribution decisions, social activities. There are some advantages to having more than one person as trustee. It gives you a little bit of checks and balances. A lot of times family members are really emotionally involved, or they can give in to family pressures, and maybe an outside corporate trustee can say, well, I understand what you're going through. The trust says we can't give money for that reason, right? Or maybe yeah. So the corporate trustee kind of steps in as a checks and balances there for them also. There's different methods for funding a third party special needs trust. If you're considering kind of establishing one of these, you could do it as a lump sum payment. Like I said, this is where maybe the trust is listed as a beneficiary on a 401k or as listed as a partial beneficiary in the will to say a third of my estate's going to go into the trust. A lot of times what I see parents doing is they're starting at a young age saying, man, I know that I want my loved one with special needs to be taken care of. So I'm setting aside, I don't know, $500 a month, $300 a month. I'm putting into this account. And in my mind, it's going to be for my loved one with special needs to be taken care of when I'm not here any longer. Another way to do it is with life insurance. I see this done a lot because parents come to me and they say, you know what, I know while I'm here, my loved one's going to be taken care of. My fear is when I'm not here, who's going to take care of them? How is that going to be funded? Um, how are we going to do that? And so that's why a lot of times I see life insurance as a really good option for funding special needs trusts. So let's jump into these a little bit in the future, a little bit more detail. So lump sum payments, caregivers can contribute. So I'll give you an example. I had a client come to me and said, "Hey, um, my son, his aunt passed away recently, and in her will, she said she wanted to give $250,000 to my son with special needs. I don't have a special needs trust set up yet. What do I do?" So we set up a special needs trust for them, had the aunt at the estate hold on to the money until we got the special needs trust set up. Once we had the trust set up, the estate of the aunt gave the money to the trust directly so that the loved one with special needs wouldn't get kicked off of their benefits. So in that case, it was a $250,000 gift into the trust, and now that money is appreciating as and waiting to be used for different things. So that's one option is a lump sum payment. Another one is an annual payment. I have another client who came to me and says, "Hey, I've been saving $250 a month for the last 25 years, and I have, a lot of money in a bank account right now. What do I do with it? And I want to keep putting $250 a month aside." And so we did. We set up a special needs trust for them, continued to make the gifts into the trust on a monthly basis. We did some other things in the trust too. The trust now bought life insurance with some of that money. But again, those assets are growing again for when they're not here, for when the parents are no longer here. And their other son is going to be taking care of their daughter at that point, their adult son. And so they just wanted to have money set aside so that the financial burden wouldn't fall to the son also. So the third way, and this is the way I probably see most common, is through life insurance. Caregivers or even money that's in the trust pays for a life insurance policy. Because again, the main concern for most of the parents, they're like, "I'm not so concerned when I'm here. It's when I'm not here that I need to make sure this trust is funded and ready to go, so that my loved one's taken care of." And so a lot of times the trust will can own the life insurance policy, and the life insurance policy is on the caregivers, one or possibly both of the caregivers. You can do what's called a second to die policy, and we'll get into that in a little bit. So that's a great way to do it. So what types of life insurance should be used to fund a special needs trust? Uh, it depends. Okay, there's a lot of different kinds of life insurance out there. You can do term life insurance. Maybe you're familiar with this. It's can be 10-year, 20-year, 15-year, 30-year term, and that means the life insurance is good for that long. So if I get it when I'm now 47, if I get a 30-year term, it ends when I'm 77. If I die when I'm 78, oh well, the term is over, so there's no life insurance to be paid. There's whole life insurance. This lasts, as it says in the name, for your whole life. That means no matter when you die, whenever it is, if you wait till you're 120, it'll still pay a claim one day and can fund the life insurance policy at that point. There's universal life insurance policy. This is based on interest rates and kind of a little technical stuff. There's survivorship life insurance policy or second to die policies. I see this as kind of the most common way that people uh, fund a special needs trust because, again, they're not so concerned when they're there, it's when they're not there. So they say, "My husband and I, or my wife and I, want to pay for a life insurance policy. And at the death of the second of us, whoever dies second, that's when the trust is funded with the life insurance policy." And that's usually the most affordable way to do it as well. So I talked about these a little bit already. There's different kinds of life insurance. There's whole life insurance where it's a guaranteed premium. The premium never goes up. You know it's going to pay one day. It's kind of set. Some policies allow you to pay premiums for shorter periods of time, 10 years, 20 years. You could pay till you're age 65, and one day it's going to pay a claim. There's universal life insurance. Again, this is based on interest rates, and you kind of build up a little bit of an account to pay for the life insurance as it gets more expensive later on. There's some good and bad to these policies. I don't like some of these policies crash later on in life, and all of a sudden you have to pay $8,000 a year for your premium or something crazy to keep it in force right about the time you need it. So there's good and bad with some universal life policies. And then again, I mentioned the survivorship whole life or survivorship life insurance, the second to die policies. Generally speaking, it costs less to insure two people than it does one because they assume one of you is probably going to live longer than the other. So that's kind of how that one works. Go through some family scenarios. These are kind of like real life examples of how people are funding supplemental needs trusts, how they're using them. So here's a couple. Mother is Amy, and these are not real names. I changed names to protect the innocent, right? Amy's 40 years old. Chris is 40 years old. They're married. They have a child with special needs, Lily. She's 8 years old, has Down syndrome. They have another child, Mark, who's 12 years old. Amy and Chris, they both have term insurance, term life insurance. It's going to end in 15 years when they're about 55 years old. They both make a decent salary. They've been setting money aside for retirement one day. They recently set up a special needs trust for Lily, but they haven't funded it yet. They apply for this survivorship or second to die whole life policy, a $500,000 benefit, death benefit. And the premium for this is about $300 to $500 a month. So they decided to put aside $300 to $500 a month so that one day when they're not here, 500,000 will come into the supplemental needs trust to provide for Lily and whoever's going to be taking care of Lily to pay for all of her extra stuff that she would need. So that's kind of one example. Another example, this is a little bit more rare, I would say, but Marla's 43, Carlo's 50. They have a child with special needs, Mario, he's 14. He has autism. Carlo works full time. Maria is basically a full time caregiver. I'm sorry. Yeah, Marla is a full time caregiver for their son, Mario. Carlo has some life insurance through work. He worries though, if something happens to Maria, it'd be difficult to replace the caregiving that she provides for Mario. Marla worries if something happens to Carlo, they wouldn't have the income to support the family anymore. Even with his insurance at work, it's maybe not enough. So Carlo takes out an additional term policy to cover the family until his retirement. He's planning on retiring around 70. And Marla takes out maybe a whole life policy on herself with Carlo as the beneficiary to fund the caregiving needs he's going to need if something were to happen to her. Last situation that I see, this is Ronald and Fung. They have a child with special needs, Timmy. They also have uh, Tommy. I'm sorry. They also have two other children. They're recently in mediation for divorce. Fung plans to retire as early as 62. Ronald wants to work until he's 70. The mediation includes child support for Tommy. With additional therapies, Tommy's going to hopes to obtain college degree, technical certificates around age 22. And they want to make sure upon their death, they leave their children with comfortable inheritance each. They wanted to equally split their estate, but they know Tommy can't inherit more than 2,000. So they apply for a survivorship life insurance policy, a big one, $1 million. They really wanted to leave their kids something. And the beneficiaries of their policy are the three children, with Tommy's share going into supplemental needs trust for his benefit. So they kind of split it up equally, but Tommy's share goes into the supplemental needs trust. So that's kind of how the supplemental needs trust or the special needs trust can help. But what about ABLE accounts? I'm sure many of you have heard about ABLE accounts and how they might fit into financial planning techniques. And I tell you, I love ABLE accounts. And I think it's not an either or when it comes to a special needs trust and ABLE account. Most of the time, it's a both and. So ABLE accounts were established back, Barack Obama signed the ABLE Act in 2014 and allows for individuals with disabilities to have an ABLE account. These are kind of similar, modeled after 529 plans, and legislation's a little bit different in each state, but it's a great asset for people that have loved ones with a disability, special needs. These are kind of the basic requirements. You have to be blind or disabled prior to age uh, 26. The disability has to have occurred prior to turning age 26, but you have to be under 46 when you open the account. Um, they're looking at changing that, so that could be changing soon. If the age criteria is met and the person's already receiving SSI or SSDI, then it's automatically eligible. But I'll say in my experience, it's pretty easy to get this account. as long as your person with special needs was determined to have a disability before age 26. It's usually just a doctor's note that says, yes, they were determined to be special needs before age 26. How this works is there's a maximum annual contributions. It's limited currently to the IRS gift tax exclusion amount in 2025. That's $19,000. And then states set limits for how much you can have inside an ABLE account. And again, all this money that goes in here is protected. This doesn't count towards the $2,000. The other thing I like about these is it gives the loved one with special needs a little bit of autonomy. You can use Fifth Third Bank. They give a, a debit card access, which I think is a great thing. Can help you teach your son or daughter, loved one with special needs, whatever it might be, how to use money. And it gives you oversight in how they use the money, but still gives them the autonomy to take the debit card with them to go get ice cream or go to the store and buy groceries themselves if you're trying to teach them about how to do that kind of stuff, trying to give them some independence and autonomy. If the person with special needs is receiving SSI, then the maximum they can have in there is $100,000. But if they're not receiving SSI, they can have up to $511,000 into an ABLE account. So it can grow substantially. There's investment options inside the ABLE account, and you're only allowed one ABLE account per person. And the other thing I like about this is the definitions for how the money can be used from an ABLE account are pretty darn general. And I will say I have not heard of the IRS cracking down on asking for receipts from people with an ABLE account. Now, can it be? Yes. And again, I'm not a CPA. This is not tax or legal advice. But in my experience, I haven't seen the IRA come or the IRS come knocking at the door saying, I need your receipt for your assistive technology that you bought, or show me how it was used for housing or transportation or something like that. Okay. So there's a lot less restriction on how ABLE accounts can be used. The purpose of them is to give our loved ones with special needs autonomy and allow them to kind of have their own money to use. So without it going against their $2,000 limit. When it comes to ABLE account payback, this is where it gets a little complex. I'll tell you how the rules are written in PA. Currently, if you do not have a beneficiary on the ABLE account, Medicaid says they will not claw back the ABLE account to themselves to say if there's money left in it, they will not claw it back. But the loophole that nobody talks about is that while PA technically doesn't have a Medicaid payback, when the beneficiary dies, if there's no subsequent beneficiary, then the account becomes part of the beneficiary's estate, and the estate is technically subject to the Medicaid payback anyway. So, it's a little bit of a PA loophole. So I would say make sure they have beneficiaries on them if you can, if you're able to put a beneficiary on the ABLE account. The great thing is it gives you some help and it gives you some control in helping them, again, spend the money wisely from the ABLE account and maybe not get taken advantage of. And I talked a little bit about the remaining funds, but how do you open an ABLE account? There's a great website, paable.org, that has all the information right there. I usually tell my clients use Fifth Third Bank because they have a great debit card. And I love the way they have the debit card. There's investment options. If you get a decent amount of money in there and you're like, man, I want this money to grow for later. There's different investment options inside the ABLE account as well. You can also make transfers from a 529 into an ABLE account without any kind of tax penalty. Both accounts have to have the same beneficiary. So I've recently been helping clients do that, transfer 529s into an ABLE account. And also, contributions can go from a special needs trust to an ABLE account for your loved one to spend. Couple of little things to consider with an ABLE account. Again, there's a $19,000 a year maximum contribution, so it's not a great place if you don't want to put it as a beneficiary of a 401k or something like that because that account grows usually, or life insurance, unless you know for sure it's going to be less than that $19,000. Yeah, and if your beneficiary really can't make any financial decisions, or you don't see any future where they can have any sort of financial autonomy at all, maybe the ABLE account is not the best option for you. I think the best option is usually both and. I really like this paable.gov website. That's a great resource for you to check out. All right, so I talked a lot. You guys are probably sick of hearing my voice. I'm sick of hearing my voice, so I'm going to kind of wrap it up a little bit here. But how do you get started? I think you need to have a team, right? You need to have professionals who are experienced in dealing with people with special needs, both the legal, the financial side of it. I'm happy to be available for anybody that has any further questions. I'll stay on here to answer any questions. But if you have any questions you want to email me, call me. Happy to answer as much as I can. Sharice, I want to thank you again for allowing me the opportunity. I want to thank you all for coming and listening. Those of you listening online later on, you're brave soldiers for dealing with my voice for the last 45 minutes. So again, thank you. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to stick around.
Thank you so much, Bryan.
Absolutely.
Hi, I have a quick question.
Sure.
So my family just